So let's figure out how we can make some controls in here. So what we're going to do is we have this box here, and if you kind of look at these sides on the box, you can kind of move them out. And you can see the nice camera preview makes this box a little smaller. So maybe let's go over here. And if you've noticed, while I was playing around with that, this number went up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change that to 15. And there we go. Okay. And that's looking pretty good. Let's hop into this here. And what we're going to do is we're literally going to copy this if statement once, twice, 3 times, and 4 times. And what we're going to do is we're going to do WASD controls, which are very common controls for mouse and movement games. So we have W, we have A. And by the way, if you're new to games altogether, WASD is super important. It's what a lot of gamers expect, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to move this up. So I'm just going to paste in this move distance here. So we're going to have to go move distance. And just to save time, I'm going to copy move distance. For the A, I will say that it is move distance on the X. We'll add in the negative here, and we'll add in the negative here. Okay, so WASD, we're going to go ahead and push save, and then run it, and watch what happens. All right, so looks like the controls are just a bit messed up. So all we'll do is we will switch over these here. So we got move, and we'll just kind of invert them, and we'll go back here. And as you can see, what will happen is you can move the W, A, S, and D, and you can kind of move this little character around. Looks pretty good, right? Now let's go ahead and let's take a look at a different key code. Now what I'm going to do is, if you look at, for instance, the down arrow, right? We would technically want this to be the up arrow. Now, if you want to have both WASD controls and arrows, what would you do? Well, there's 2 ways to do that. I'm going to show you the improper way of doing this. Okay, I'm doing this 100% on purpose to show you what you shouldn't do. So we have a bunch of if statements here, and we can do dot up arrow, and then this is dot, I believe this is left arrow. Okay, and then this one here is dot down arrow, and one more dot right arrow. Okay, so let's save that, and let's hop back into Unity, and we'll take another look at that. We'll say, well, does it work? Yeah, it does work. But again, it's not what you're supposed to do. Even though it works, the way that you want to do this is you want to add in a double ampersand and copy this over. Okay? You want to add a double ampersand and then copy this input. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete all of this if here. And what that does is that if statement, if we look at this very carefully, I'll highlight it. It says either, and actually it should be an or. So it's this statement here is going to be if the W key or the up arrow key, then you move it up. Okay. Now the reason why this is better is, 1, it takes up less code, and 2, you shouldn't repeat yourself as much as you possibly can with code here. So you should only be able to write a line once. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy this. All right. And I'm going to paste it, and I'm just going to paste it and paste it again. And of course, we now have to change up arrow to left arrow. Then this is down arrow, and then right arrow. All right, now if we save it and then go back into Unity here, and we'll go ahead and run it, you can see that both of these two work. Now, when it comes to controls, you have to do what players are expecting. So some people like to play with the WASD controls, and other people like to play with the arrow controls. Have you ever played a game where the controls were just not good, or they didn't do what you were thinking they should do? Well, the thing is that when that happens, people don't like your game. And you want people to like your game. And you want people, and especially with controls, the controls have to be so good that they are intuitive to the player. So this is a small example of this, where you can push all of these different keys and use both of these different control schemes, and they do indeed work. All right? See you in the next tutorial. So let's take a look at this game here. So if we run it again and we kind of move, yeah, I mean, that kind of looks good, I guess. But wouldn't it be better if we kind of held down one of the keys and have it moved here? Now, not to say that there's anything wrong with this kind of game. This is one kind of movement, and one kind of movement is going to work for different kinds of games. So for instance, you can see that, this would have kind of a more old school style. But I know that most people watching this are probably not going to want this kind of control. So what do we need to do instead? Well, what we're going to do is we're just going to prototype this first. And by the way, whenever you change something, it's always good to prototype it first. And what prototyping means is that you're going to try it and see if it works and see if you like it. So we're going to go to input dot. Again, we're going to call this get key. Just get key, and then we'll go to key code. And we might as well do something we haven't done before, like M. All right. And we can just copy one of these transforms.translates. And while we're also here, let's copy one of the rotates too. Just see what happens. Now, you can see there's a little bit of a squiggly line in here. Okay? And there's a squiggly line. And it says parser error, expected symbol. Most errors are not in plain English, so what that means is that I didn't close the brackets. It's important that you close the right brackets with the if statement. Let's go back into Unity here, and of course let's stop it and run it again, and we'll take a quick look to see what's going on. So we'll take a look here, and if we type in M, yeah, look at that. It does kind of work here. So it's rotating and kind of moving too. Let's go back in here, and let's just comment out transform.rotate. Save it, of course. Hop back into that here. So we're going to push play and push the M key, and look at that. It does indeed work. So it's up to you which one you like. Now, what you can do is you see how we have this get key here. Well, I'm going to copy that and delete it. And instead of get key down, I'm just going to go ahead and add in get key. Look at this. Get key, get key, get key, and get key. Let's save that and hop back into Unity. Go ahead and push play. And we'll take a look. And look at that. We got this nice looking movement here. And of course, it also works with the items here. Now you notice that it moves quite a bit faster. So that's something that's interesting about that there. So you can also move diagonally if you push two at a time here. But watch what happens if you try and push both like left and right at the same time or up and down. They both don't move here. Okay, so that's actually kind of interesting. And of course, we can go off and on the screen. So that is also something to keep in mind as well. All right, see you in the next tutorial. So as you move forward in your project here, these keyboard controls, if we look at this here, keyboard controls is not exactly as specific as we want it to be anymore. Really, they should be WASD control. Okay, and you notice how keyboard controls is no longer existing? Well, that's why we have to put that in here. So as you go along in your game, your voids will change. All right, so let's add another void here. We'll call this controls for now. Okay, and you'll see why in just a second. Because what we're going to do is we're going to go and add in and show you, I'm going to show you some other inputs here. But before we even do any of that, I'm going to grab one of these transform.rotates here so we can go and test this out here. So let's kind of move in here and let's say if, okay, and we'll say input dot, and what we can do is we'll go get key up. Okay, and as you can see, we have get key. We're going to see, we already know what get key down is. Get key up is exactly what you think it is. Okay, and what we'll do is we'll just use dot A because it's very close and accessible. And what we'll also do is we'll also comment out WASD controls because, well, we're not really using them now, are we? Okay, so what this is saying is that if input get key up is equal to key code dot A, then it's going to transform.rotate. So let's take a look at this here, and let's take a look at how it's actually going to work. So we'll run that in here again, and we'll say, take a couple seconds for it to load. So I push A, nothing happens. I lift it up. Every time I lift it up, it rotates. Okay, that's to be expected. Pretty cool. Now, let's go back in here for a second and let's take a look at some other different kinds of inputs. Okay, let's go to mouse. We'll say get mouse button down, and we'll say get mouse button dot down. And if we even open up the bracket here, it will say int button. Okay, and so we can go, and if we type in the word button, okay, and we type in 1, and we also make sure we need to close everything up here. We'll go back and save everything, and we'll run it again. All right, takes a couple seconds for it to load. You see that button 1 is indeed the second click. And if we go back into MonoDevelop here, button starts at 0. So if you want it to be the main mouse button, make sure it's button 0. All right, so let's just go ahead and let's add that in here again. And we can say, as soon as we click here, you can see it does indeed rotate. Okay, so get mouse button up works the same way, except when you release it. So let's go ahead and let's run that here. Make sure you save it. And sometimes, if you go back really quickly, you might actually miss saving it. This happens to me quite a bit. Right? So I click, and then when I release, it rotates. So pretty cool. And you can see, let's just delete all of this here. We'll say .get mouse button. Okay? And, if we see mouse button, we'll say button 0. Watch what happens. We'll go back into Unity, we'll stop it, and we'll play it again. and we'll just take a couple seconds for it to load. And there we go. Pretty cool stuff. I think that looks pretty neat. There we go. Now, if you wanted to again change it to a different button, just maybe select it as 1. That's your right click. So let's go ahead and let's do that here. Take a couple seconds for it to load. And you'll see that we got the, the other button here. Now let's take a look at one other item here. Let me copy this if statement. And we'll say that this is 0. And we'll make this 40. So if you click the first button, it goes one way. If you click the other button, it goes the other way. So we'll take a look at that here, and we'll push play. All right, so we'll give it a couple seconds for it to load, and you can see it's rotating. And we'll just zoom in so you can kind of see that a little bit better. So it's rotating one way, and then this is rotating another way. And if you wanted to, for instance, you could make this 40 and 0 this case. And what that's going to do is that's going to rotate it along the y-axis. Make sure you save it and then stop it and play it again. And what that's going to do is I'll zoom in just a second here until it loads. And there you go. So there you go. And that's actually looking really cool. And if you click both of them at the same time, they do that there, right? So these are just some of the other different kinds of inputs you can have, all right? See you in the next tutorial.